Madeleine McCann, shocking new evidence emerges that may crack the case.
I got nightmares in my head, I fear thoughts build up until I can't hear. That my mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. I got nightmares in my head, I fear the thoughts build up until I can't hear. That my mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper.
Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic community in true crime. Hello from Lake Tahoe. It's a beautiful day here. I hope you're having a good day wherever you are. Now we're going to go to an article from In Touch Weekly. It's one of a bunch of really idiotic articles, and just go through this whole tilting at windmills nonsense. And anyway, the article starts, "It's 17 years since Madeleine was taken from us," Jerry McCann wrote on the official Find Madeleine campaign page that's on Facebook. It was on May 3rd, around about two weeks ago. "It's hard to even say without shaking our heads in disbelief." Now, what this reference already implies is that the reference to Bruckner is something that Jerry McCann and Kate McCann are particularly interested in, especially putting it under the heading, "Shocking New Evidence Emerges." In that reference on Facebook, they make absolutely no reference to Bruckner or the trial or anything like that. Now, the article goes on to note, the timing of the post was eerie. Just hours earlier, a British officer was in a German courtroom testifying about a mysterious voicemail left on a Scotland Yard tip line that blew the case wide open. No, it wasn't hours earlier that a mysterious voicemail was left, but hours earlier that someone testified about getting a voicemail years ago about an event that had supposedly happened even more years earlier, and that the British cops had looked into and not pressed any charges. So it's a weird way of interpreting the information in a way where, I don't know, is the journalist a little retarded? This is why the mainstream media is accused of being fake news, and also where so much of social media takes their cue. Tell a very shocking story that is ultimately untrue, but pretend you don't know it's true. I'm not sure what's worse, not knowing that it's not true, or wagging the dog. Anyway, before we get to the rest of this analysis, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. If you're enjoying this analysis, please like, share, leave a comment. You can also hit the thanks button, and let's get started. Now, the article goes on to note that a British police officer was in a German courtroom testifying about a mysterious voicemail left on a Scotland Yard tip line that blew the case wide open. Is this case blown wide open? Has it just been blown wide open? I mean, this information has been in the media narrative for the past 2 years. Is it suddenly blown wide open? Now, in some ways, the testimony is groundbreaking. In the absence of a trial, there's never been a trial related to Madeleine. There's been some litigation around defamation and slander, which the McCanns ultimately lost. And so in the absence of a trial, and let's get this part fucking right, okay, there still isn't a trial about Madeleine McCann. Bruckner still isn't on trial about Madeleine McCann. But this is one of the few times we're actually hearing from a British cop who was on the investigation, who's forced to tell the truth about what he knows. The article notes, quote, "It marks the first time a member of law enforcement has in court shed light on what really happened, revealing how authorities initially identified their prime suspect, Christian Bruckner." Now, even that part's very misleading. Revealing how authorities initially identified their prime suspect. Christian Bruckner wasn't the prime suspect. Robert Murat was one of the prime suspects. The McCanns were some of the initial prime suspects. Bruckner became a prime suspect way down the line. And Bruckner, 47, is currently serving time in Germany for separate crime, is now on trial in an unrelated case involving crimes he allegedly committed in the same area. Oh, so we've got a criminal who committed crimes in the same area. Let's just throw Madeleine in with that. QED. And now, guess what the truth is? Not that Bruckner cracks the case, but that he doesn't. Bruckner doesn't crack the case. That's the truth. The perfect suspect for what the McCanns had in mind couldn't be connected to Madeleine's disappearance. Well, that's a bit of a buzzkill, but don't let that get in the way of a good story. The article goes on to note, during proceedings on May 2nd, Detective Constable Mark Draycott explained how authorities obtained a key piece of evidence in the McCann case from one of Bruckner's former friends who wanted to help police. What do you think this key piece of evidence is? What could it be? Well, someone saying something. That's the key piece of evidence. Someone said something. That's hardly a key piece of evidence. And ultimately, where we are now, no charges, no trial against Bruckner, clearly shows this wasn't key evidence. There is no key evidence. Whatever this is the opposite of key evidence. What is that? Keyless evidence. Going back to the article, one of my jobs, and these are the words of the detective testifying, he said, one of my jobs was to check the tip line on a daily basis. And on May 18, do you think it was May 18, 2007, 2008, 2009, 2010, 2011, no, 2012, no, 13, no, 14, no, 15, no, 16, no. May 18, 2017, 10 years later, there was a tip. And there was a message on this tip line. And the detective testified that he returned the call to a Greek mobile number that was answered by an ex-con. And his name was Helga Lars Bushing, and we've heard from him. We know who he is. Now, let me repeat that. What this is a phone call close to the 10-year anniversary of Madeleine's disappearance. You know, the year that a big documentary came out. It was made by McCann apologists, and it was pushing the abductor narrative. And so suddenly Helga wakes up and he sees an opportunity to be relevant or valuable, maybe to participate in something like that in the future, maybe to be paid to participate. And all of that was 7 years ago. And what happened since then? The McCanns, as far as I know, have never mentioned him, not this year during his trial, not last year during bumper-to-bumper fake news on Bruckner, and certainly not in 2017. Or did they mention him in 2017? If they did, what has happened over the past 7 years? Going back to the article, Bushing said he'd been buddies with Bruckner, so an ex-con had been friends with an ex-con, and now suddenly he's this credible witness. And he lived in Portugal's Algarve region from 1995 to 2007, and that Bruckner gave information in relation to the McCann investigation. This part is the most fucked up of all. In-person interviews followed, first in Athens in 2017, then in London in 2018. Bushing said he had a conversation, it's actually spelt wrong in the article, spelled conversion, with Christian at the Orgiva Festival in 2008. That conversation was in relation to the McCann investigation, and this is it. Can you believe this? He then says, I can't talk about that. Is in court, the detective in court, to talk about this aspect, and then says, I can't talk about it. That's what he says to the court in the court. Wow, so even in court where he's ostensibly there to talk about Bruckner, he can't talk about it. Is that because he knows something and because he doesn't know anything? Is that because this is crucial evidence that's going to break the case, or it's not? Bushing has already publicly shared some of what he told the cops, so even though this officer won't say anything, well, it's already been shared publicly in the media. For example, last year, he recounted running into Bruckner at the Spanish music festival where he allegedly incriminated himself in Madeleine's disappearance. The key word here is allegedly. And what is key here is that Bruckner didn't incriminate himself, because if he did, he would have been charged. He would have been charged in 2017. 7 years later, there's still nothing to charge him with, despite entire power stations being needed to push out the tilting digital windmill. You know what tilting at windmills refers to, right? It means fighting an imaginary enemy. That's exactly what Bruckner is. Going back to the article, while talking about traveling to Portugal, the topic came up, and I said, anyway, I don't understand how the little one could have disappeared without a trace. Christian had drunk 2 or 3 beers, and he said she didn't scream. I thought, he knows that. He has something to do with it. And this is supposed to be the ace card of a 17-year investigation. This is the shocking new evidence that has been in the media narrative for the past 2 years that is supposed to crack the case, and yet hasn't, and won't, and will never. Going back to the article, his information was passed on to German and Portuguese authorities, sparking a probe into Bruckner, who's denied involvement. He was finally named an official suspect in 2022. That's 5 years after this tip, and just 2 weeks before the statute of limitations was set to expire. So you kind of get the feeling that they hadn't really done anything with this, and then they thought, well, just to continue putting pressure on him, let's deal with this, because he was about to go on trial. And so he was named a suspect, and that's it. Robert Murat was named a suspect. What happened to him? The McCanns were named suspects. The article also notes, since then, the investigation has continued. Last year, cops dug up campsites near the reservoir Bruckner frequented around the time Madeleine disappeared, but charges have yet to be filed, leaving Madeleine's parents living in limbo. And this is quoting what they said at the time on May 3rd, the absence still aches. Again, this article suggests that the McCanns themselves are in some kind of limbo regarding Bruckner. Are they? When they themselves have showed or expressed little or no interest in Bruckner and disagree with the Germans who are pushing the idea that Madeleine is no longer alive. The Germans are right about that, but wrong about Bruckner. The McCanns are right about Bruckner, but wrong about Madeleine still being alive, at least in my opinion, and in the opinion of the cadaver and blood dogs who entered and alerted in apartment 5A during year 1, the first couple of months of this case. If you think about this case, it's a crazy case involving a tail being hatched, that's T-A-L-E, a tail being hatched and then eventually becoming such a tall tail, windmill tall, that the tail eventually starts wagging the dog, basically the windmill starting to tilt at itself. Someone fighting enemies that are not there is almost as silly as fighting enemies you yourself hatched, which is what people like OJ and others who got away with murder have done. But imagine the American media still hunting for a non-OJ killer. It's just when the media do it, one realizes how freaking stupid the media actually are, or can be when they want to be. But why don't people hold them, the media, accountable for such nonsense? You might say, it's not really a big deal, I know what happened. On my flight to the USA, I flew via London, I sat next to someone from Yorkshire who was adamant that the case is all about Bruckner. And so someone who doesn't really pay attention, who reads these articles, gets their sense of reality from that. And who's responsible for that, for this reality? The British media. And I think In Touch Weekly is American media, the media beyond the British media. Who's going to hold them accountable? Where are we going to find reality if not in the media? In social media? What do you think? I'm not going to take it further than that. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.